Good afternoon, everyone. It's great again. We are in our penultimate program of the public view, and we want to hear your views. I am joined this afternoon by my co-host, Julian Rogers, and we have a packed panel, lots of perspectives to share with you this afternoon. But I'll begin with introducing the chair of the RSTAC, the European Status Advisory Committee, the Subcommittee on Fundamental Principles, Rights and Freedoms. You know her by now, Sharita Granum. Joining Sharita, we have a couple of guests in this early part of the program. The founder of the Barbados Association of Muslim Ladies, Ms. Farhana Bulbulia, who is very much an advocate. She's been involved in the socioeconomic and educational advancement of Muslim women and girls. She's had over a decade of experience in advocacy for women's rights. So Farhana has her pulse on many pressing issues. On education, she's an education ambassador to the Shirley Chisholm Education Foundation. On youth, she's a project coordinator for You Report Barbados, and she's the lead of the Commonwealth Youth Gender and Leeds Network Child, Early and Forced Marriage Committee. She also serves on the Barbados' National Child Rights Committee, and earlier this year, she mobilized one of the largest movements in juvenile justice reform here in Barbados. As a professional advocate in gender and communications and an analyst, we look forward to her views this afternoon on the draft charter for Barbados. So a warm welcome to you, Farhana. Also joining us this afternoon in the program is a photographer, publisher, and digital media strategist. His name is Luke Lascaris, and the Bazodi magazine is a magazine that he's published. He's the publisher for it, and he has dedicated a lot of it to Barbadian culture and heritage. Luke uses social media to effectively connect with people. He uses his voice and the platform as a tool of advocacy and activism, especially among young people in Barbados. So that platform is going to encourage the younger voice, the voices of the future, to play a greater role in civic engagement and have an impact on Barbados' future. So the role of civic participation is national development. This afternoon, we want to shine a spotlight on that aspect and the participation of young people and creatives. So I'm going to hand over at the helm of these discussions. Sharita, I'd like you to kick off by providing some context on the involvement of youth and creatives and participation in the civic role for the draft charter.
Thank you so much, Alison, and good afternoon to everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you again in this forum. And I am looking forward to engaging with you all and receiving these much valued contributions on the matter of the proposed Charter of Barbados. So this evening, we touch a bit on the concept of local governance, but we really focus on the civic engagement and participation from a youth and a creative perspective. And I'm so excited to hear these perspectives today. So, and this is a timely and very, important national conversation because too often we hear that our young people and our artists are not engaged enough in the affairs of our country. I'm not really convinced that that is the case for the majority, certainly not for the case for the panelists that we have on today, who exemplify in their respective ways how youth and creatives are leaving their positive mark on the social and political landscape of Barbados. So a few very simple definitions to start. What is governance? Governance is the political and institutional processes through which decisions are taken and implemented. And in the case of Barbados, our head of state, or parliament, or executive, otherwise known as cabinet, or public sector and public statutory agencies, all of these things make up our governance model. And local governance would be an additional tier or layer of governance at the community level, where governments can interact with citizens and communities on an ongoing basis. The Thorne Commission on Local Governance has been engaged in extensive and commendable work in this regard, educating, consulting, building awareness around local governance and its merits to the improved quality of life of our people and our communities and overall civic engagement. What do we mean by civic engagement? Well, simply our leadership and residents working closely together to improve lives and positively impact communities. So I'm going to end here with this context and these definitions and background by reminding you that our youth and our creatives must be recognized and must be respected for their laudable contributions and their fearlessness, really, in tackling some of our most challenging societal issues. In so many cases, not waiting for an invitation to the table, but creating their own table and inviting us and saying, come and join me. So with that, I hand back to you, Alison, and I look forward to the rest of today's session. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, Sharita. We're to a lot of rich and exciting discussion. The whole matter of governance and participation, I think let's begin this afternoon with the public view, your views. Here's what some Bajans had to say.
Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that policymaker decisions do affect me, my family, and all Barbadians. And no, in a sense, I'm not a big fan of the political game, so to speak, the politics, as we call it.
Yes, I do.
Of course, indeed. I believe community engagement is a big part of what a civilization means.
Oh, most definitely. Community engagement gives, our perspective on what's going on within the political arena. So, hey, our opinion matters.
Well, good evening, Sharita, and good evening to the other panelists. I'd like to first thank you for having me here on this virtual meeting on the proposed Charter of Barbados. And I'd also like to commend the Republic Status Transition Advisory Committee for hosting these series of virtual meetings. I think they're extremely timely and important in terms of having this discourse and dialogue with the public as to what this transition to becoming a republic will mean. So I find it quite important and timely again that we're discussing the involvement of youth civic engagement as it pertains to this charter. Now, I've always been a huge proponent of engaging the youth and involving the youth in discussions, whether it be at the local, the community level, the national level, and even as we go to regional. And the reason for that is that it has to be a holistic approach. Governance needs and democracy needs a holistic approach. And so that means having every subsection of the community. That means having everyone that has a voice, all stakeholders, bringing them to the table. And, when we talk about youth involvement, I can admit, I appreciate the fact that you're not young forever. And so at some stage, you make that transition just from being a youth or being a part of the community. And a new cohort then starts the discussion of youth involvement. And so it's so important that while you're still in that stage of youth and you have that fresh perspective, some people may call it naive, but I call it hopeful. And you think about things differently. And then you can translate that into tangible effects as you get the support of the wider community, and you can actually bring about some change for things that you see. And so, a great example I'd use of that would be my involvement in the Nelson Must Go movement. The Nelson statue that stood in Hero Square, Lord Horatio Nelson, we've known about it for a number of years, decades. We've known the history, the controversy, the discussions surrounding it. And I noted that, as a youth, I noted that. I came up, I grew up hearing about this. And in doing all my research, all my studies, I have an undergraduate history from the University of West Indies, Cave Hill. And in knowing my history and speaking to persons older than I am, I understood that, this symbolized something that was not Barbadian. This symbolized something that the country did not necessarily stand for. And having it placed in Hero Square to me was a slap in the face as a Barbadian. And understanding that, and also being a young person and understanding the power of social media, understanding the power of technology, I was able to marry the two and, work towards having the process completed with the removal of the statue, which took place last year. Now, something like that, is a great example, I think, of how powerful youth civic engagement can be and is, because, that situation is not something that exists in a silo. It's not by itself. There are other young people out there who are working assiduously hard to address social issues and marrying both the knowledge passed down from older generations, their understanding and interpretation of the situation, and also then, new and emerging technology. So social media, for example, for me, Twitter was a major point in getting this movement off the ground. Getting to the petition to the signatures, the number of signatures that I got to, social media played a crucial role in that. And so I think we need to take these things in mind when we're even, like, for example, discussing the charter, when we're even looking to shape how we are as a country moving into the status of being a republic. I think these things are pretty important. And, I note that within the charter, when you go to Article 3, this states, and this deals with democracy, and every Barbadian has a duty to participate in the economic, political, and social life of Barbados as an expression of active citizenship. Every Barbadian has the right to vote and run for public office in accordance with the laws of this country. And that particular article speaks towards a lot of the things I think that, we need to capitalize on and remember the youth when we're discussing. In particular, the two last paragraphs start by, we shall promote the right of access to information and the right to freedom of communication and expression, provided always that there is protection of a citizen's personal data, and that social or other media shall be respectful of the rights and reputations of citizens. And, for my part, particularly, what I would love to see developing out of this is that there is some consideration in terms of the evolution of democracy. Now, for my movement, Nelson Must Go, as I said, we largely did it on social media. It literally caught fire, spread, persons started being able to communicate and starting to share their ideas on this thing, because there were so many people that felt similarly, and social media provided the platform for them to come together and to move the movement forward, which unfortunately, we didn't have this 20 years ago, during all these discussions that we would have had previously. And in doing that, I thought about it. I said, it's so important that as we evolve, the country going forward, we put things in place that allow people to have this kind of effect on where the country goes. Now, what do I mean by that? I use the form of a petition. That petition got, over 10,000 signatures, and I presented it to the Prime Minister's office. It would be, for me, the right move forward and the sensible move forward for us to have a framework incorporated into, like, for example, the charter or what's not, that then speaks towards having a petition framework that allows citizens to have that extra form of democracy, where citizens can, once, it's been approved and once they feel strongly about a particular topic, they then can use that to access getting change in the short to medium term or even the long term. And so, for me, graciously, I was pretty excited and happy that it turned out the way it did. But I think there needs to be some form of regulation in place that allows citizens to be guaranteed that particular freedom to express themselves in that way, and then allows government to regulate, for example, as what is said in the charter, making sure that the protection of that citizen's personal data and social or other media, etc., that is adhered to. And then it also, in a sense, binds government to make sure that they then are accountable to the people on particular issues. So for me, it was the Lord Horatio Nelson statue. For someone else, it may be another social issue that they perceive, and having a framework or a procedure in place allows that form of civic engagement to further exist. And I think that's something that we really need to consider, and something that I would really love to see take form and take shape as we move towards becoming a republic.
Some great contributions there, and some thoughts that could provoke some excellent discussion amongst us. I'd like to begin by inviting Farhana and Luke to respond to Alex's last comment about the petition framework as an opportunity for democracy and our young voices to affect change. What are your views on his contribution? I'd like to hear from both of you.
So I think I can begin here and say that I relate a lot to what Alex would have shared and his experiences. I think as young people, we often see issues within our communities, within our schools, within the spaces that we occupy, and we're so impassioned to see positive change happen. And the reality of our society is that oftentimes the voices of youth are not valued. You know, we're often told you're just one person speaking out. What do the others think? And it becomes a case where, you know, our ideas, our voice, our opinions get lost by what perhaps the older generation may think is inexperienced voices who have not been through what they think is the trenches. And it really negates from our lived experiences. So I think what Alex spoke to is something that puts power or gives power to more people that can influence change in positive ways. Because oftentimes we are impassioned to do things, to do positive things. We just don't have the power or the capacity within the spaces that we're in. But if there are mechanisms through which we can come together and say very clearly and definitively, this is what we want, then I think it puts power. It puts a lot more power back into the hands of those who are directly affected by the negative circumstances that surround us. So I would say that I fully agree with that.
Lived experience in advocacy and in civic participation for Hannah. But Luke, you, like Alex, have used social media effectively to advance your voice and that of other young people. How do you respond to Alex's suggestions and his recommendations for us to consider in this draft charter?
Yes, I definitely do agree with Alex, both Alex and Farhana, that the use of including a ability for people to speak directly to Parliament, to the executive, to use their voice in that matter, to be able to change things that affect them. I think that's a necessary part. That is a way that we can diversify our democracy and move away from this idea, that very static idea from 1966, that where you think voting is your only way that you participate in the democracy and no way to effect change. Otherwise, there's no way to communicate from the common man to the executive. Like, there's no way for them to have a channel and have any form of linkages other than, let's say, you randomly stand up outside of Parliament and screaming at politicians as they pass by, or where you have to hope, like what Alex did, and you get involved in, you utilize your voice online to that people catch on and people agree with it and they identify with it and they get involved in that type of way. But if you have an idea or a movement that you think is good and then that gets lost because you don't have the right traction, or you don't have the ability to communicate, or is not able to be brought across efficiently, and then voices are lost like that. So to echo for Hannah, I do believe that it increases participation from people. It brings a lot more people on board. It gives more people a voice. It includes more Barbadians in the democratic process, and it really strengthens our democracy, and that really should be the core of what happens as we change to a republic.
So it really brings up the question of, how did you get the boldness? How did you feel the strength to start your movements? Why did you feel your voice was going to be impactful and to be heard? How does your own mobilization impact on how we shape this going forward to ensure that others have the confidence that you had to get started. A little bit about your experience, I think, might be useful for others to understand. So, Farhana, I'm going to ask you to begin with your own advocacy.
Thanks, Alison. So I wasn't confident, and I think it's important for persons to know that. My advocacy started about 10 years ago when I was at the age of 16 years old. And it started really because it needed to be said. There were things that were happening that I saw around me that were wrong, things that were affecting the people that around me that were not being spoken about and were completely left off. And I think for decision makers, without having the knowledge that these things are happening within communities, they cannot institute change. And so it came out of a necessity that we needed to save lives, a necessity that we needed to preserve the mental health of our people, and that we needed to see progress in all facets of our society, in all diverse aspects of our society. And that's really where it started. And my journey over time has changed. And 10 years ago, you would not see women or girls who look like me taking up seats at tables, saying what we feel and think. And the reality is that perhaps back then, we ourselves didn't feel that we had the right to take up those tables. And I remember very fondly when I first started, speaking out, and a few articles got published in the newspaper about the work that myself and women within our community was doing. The comments that came with it: go back to where you've come from, and you come with an agenda, and you have to preserve the Barbadian identity and not allow these persons to take up positions of leadership. And it begs the question of what is a Barbadian identity? What does that look like? And I think these are fundamental questions, because then if we're able to answer that, then we're able to say, what will our leadership look like? And we have to recognize that Barbados is diverse. It is not a homogenous society where all of us look and feel the same, but we do have shared experiences that we can connect on. But it's important to honor that diversity. And my journey has really been linked very strongly to that need for more inclusive policy making, for more inclusive governance, where we're making decisions that take into consideration the complex and diverse nature that people interact with their leaders and decision makers. So that for me is very important. And I think the Charter really speaks to that. The first article of the Charter speaks to the right of every Barbadian, regardless of his or her background, identity, religion, culture, way of life. It really grounds the Charter and everything that follows in that. And I think that's what makes the Charter so pivotal for us and for young people especially, because we're moving away from that idea that Barbados belongs to one, and really moving to the idea that Barbados belongs to all of us. Should we choose to develop it and honor that?
Yes, Farhana, there's a lot there to unpack, and I want to, at this juncture, invite another panelist, Shade Jemat, who's an attorney at law and a business development consultant. She's got over 10 years working with micro, small, and medium enterprises, but perhaps her more recent role has even more gravitas for this conversation as a draft charter. She was very recently appointed by the government of Barbados to oversee a consultative policy development and implementation process in her capacity as chairperson of the National Youth Policy Coordinating Committee. It's a long name for a committee, but Shade, I think you're up to the task at hand. So perhaps you could weigh in. It's good to have you join us this afternoon. Weigh in before we open the phone lines to the public so that we have their view as we continue this discussion. So Shade, what are your thoughts?
Thank you so
Welcome.
much. Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to share my voice on these issues. I think I really just want to echo the sentiments that have been expressed by both Luke and Farhana, especially in terms of Article 2 of that charter. I think what was really important for me was seeing our identity expressed in terms that acknowledge, for example, sex, gender, and sexual orientation, those types of issue of recognizing that we are a very diverse society. When you about, the people that came and the way they came, I really appreciated the fact that that was acknowledged in a very clear terms, that, there are layers to Barbadian identity, and apart from a national identity, I really appreciated the fact that it acknowledged our regional identity and how important that was to our continued self-determining. Really appreciated that about the charter. And with respect to Article 2, the way we treat each other and everything it had to say, I think that's really, really important, because even hearing Farhana recount her own experiences with, trying to represent and correct certain issues that she was experiencing, being met with an energy or a response that said, you are not Barbadian, or you're not Barbadian enough. I think this charter is a real opportunity to change that direction and make sure that when we talk about developing Barbados, we're talking about developing Barbados with all of its resources, all of its people, regardless of race, religion, or any of the other factors.
Thank you, Shadi. I know that a lot of your work also extends to ensuring this protection initiatives of international agencies like UNDP and UN Women are helping to create that kind of capacity building for online resources. And it makes me want to go back to Luke for his thoughts as well, because of the focus that we always need to have and not sideline our creatives. So Luke, your own perspectives with regard to not just your work, but what this charter could do in that regard.
Well, I believe that fully that the inclusion of youth with the charter is an important part, and that the charter does speak to that, not just youth, but everybody, as both Shade and Farhana said, like everybody, where the charter brings in all types of people from all the makeup of what Barbadian society is, and everybody is included, and everybody has a voice, and everybody feels heard. Whereas in the past, coming out of the Independence Project, people sometimes would have grown up not feeling as though they were Barbadian, or that they were included in terms of democracy, or things that were being said and things that were being done and how the country was being shaped. But now this new charter really irons out everything and showcases that everybody should be involved. And I do especially think that youth should be involved in that, and that they should also be given a voice and made to understand that it is not, I think I referenced this before, it's not just a case that you vote one time once every 5 years and then that's it, and then that's your only contribution to democracy and to how your country is run and how your country goes and stuff like that. You need to have a more engaged perspective, and I do believe the charter speaks to that. I do like how it includes all Barbadians, including people within the diaspora as well. It includes it explicitly includes people of whether it's race, sex, gender, sexual orientation, religion, whatever have you, and that everybody feels involved. It pulls it all in, and it really pulls it all in as it drives towards a future direction.
Look forward to the continued conversation, because you are the future and we want to have Barbados you shape for the future. For those of you who are joining us, this is the Public View. It's our program. I invite you to call us 228-5562 or 228-5563. And in addition, you may send us a WhatsApp, 228-5562, send a voice note or text, as the case may be. If you're joining us online, we're back up, yes, after that blackout on Monday, I think it was. We're back in business, and you can still make your contributions on Facebook at CBC Barbados or at S Barbados. So join the conversation. Julian?
Thank you, Allison. And just reminding everybody that we're here on behalf of the Republican Committee, and we very much want to have your participation. via phone or WhatsApp or sending material up to the committee itself. We're going to continue now by introducing some more personalities to our panel. And let me start first with Sade. You met Sade already, the attorney at law and business development consultant. But I'd like to add to the list none other than Ronald King. And we can tell you about him now because he's got quite a story. Ronald King is a lady, sorry, an Afro-Barbadian human rights activist, an intersectional Caribbean feminist. In 2016, she founded the viral cyber feminist movement at Life Leggings, which later evolved into a grassroots organization, Leggings, Caribbean Alliance Against Gender-Based Violence. And as a director, her role is to ensure that the organization fulfills its commitment to reducing the region's pervasive rape culture and helping to eradicate regional occurrences of gender-based violence. In this segment is where we pose a question. How does the Charter address civic participation? Well, let's go to the Charter itself and share with you. We commit to the giving of time, energy, and resources to our communities and national organizations so that they may increase their influence in the society. Remain conscious that every generation is indebted to the one which preceded it and to morally obligated to the ones that follow. Recognize the critical role that Barbadians by birth, by descent, by marriage, and by choice throughout the Barbadian diaspora have and continue to play in all aspects of national endeavor. We welcome that contribution. We commit to ensuring its continued and strengthened collaboration. We reflect with pride on the past and future accomplishments of Barbadians all over the globe and who remain rooted in our Barbadian values and traditions and who give life to the character of who we are as a people to the rest of the world. We pledge to continue building a caring Barbados in which we commit to the fostering of greater opportunities for everyone to participate in the expansion of our economy and in the creation of wealth for all. And of course, that is the Charter. I think it covers a lot of ground and answers a lot of questions which have been posed over these town halls. But we're not satisfied with just sharing the Charter with you. We went out and, of course, tried to get the reaction of people out there on a number of questions. So here's the first question. If given the opportunity to participate in or contribute to government, would you take it?
More than likely not. I am interested in what's happening within the scope of, our social economic policies and that type of thing. But in general, I'm not really a political type of take sides type of person.
Of course, I always do. Just in 2019, I actually was a part of decision making of the plastic ban we imposed in 2020. I believe that was.
So would you represent your community?
Again, I always do.
Voice?
I'm an entrepreneur, a scientist, co-founder of Oasis Laboratory here in Barbados, where we develop some natural products essentially from seaweed. And creating that platform allowed us essentially to be a voice for the environment, a voice for young people. So it's something that is a major part of who I am and my business platform.
Most definitely. As it takes a village to raise a child. So I definitely believe that being part of any community organization, get your voice out there representing those who are not confident to do it. Yeah, sure.
Do you see community participation as important to national development?
Indeed, and I would love to see more of it amongst my peers and young people, Barbadians in general. Yeah.
Yes, I do. They go hand in hand. Without our perspective, what do they have to work with? We have to bring our voice, and we do have a voice. It may not seem that way sometimes. Sometimes we're a little on the passive side, but we do have a voice, and without our input, the ideas can't really, there's no fruition for them. There's nothing for them to work with if we don't have to see what we think or what we feel.
Well, there you are then, the comments of people in the Barbadian community as we are there any ways you currently participate in your community?
Unfortunately, because of COVID, no. That voice now is mostly online. It's a neighbor thing mostly because, yeah, we're all trying to be safe. So, yeah, common sense has to prevail. Even though your heart might be there, common sense has to prevail.
As I mentioned before, Oasis Laboratory, yes. So right now I'm working on a small campaign encouraging Barbadians to get vaccinated using my platform here in Oasis Laboratory. So yes.
So there you go. You got a reaction of people to the questions posed, and very interesting to hear the range of responses. But speaking of responses, we're going to ask the people that we have now in this segment of the town hall, Ronald King and Shade Gemmett, to respond to some of the comments they've heard. Let's start first with Ronald King. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Ronald, sorry, go right ahead.
Hey, thank you. Basically, some of the comments that I would have heard, I agree definitely in terms of civic engagement being important to national development. I think in terms of the youth and how we contribute to society, the things that we want to see, the changes that we want to see, the ways in which we want to have our rights affirmed and reflected in terms of the government, that community engagement, the charter provides this way in which it recognizes our rights. It recognizes us as individuals within the Barbadian context fully in ways that we would not have seen in previous charters within the Constitution. And so in terms of the charter and persons wanting to create that change within the society, it marries those two and allows us to be able to do so, to create the Barbados that we want to see.
Right, so that's your first response, but we'll expect to hear more from you. But let's go to Shade Gemmett and give her what sense did you get from the feedback coming from people we questioned earlier? Shade, you're muted.
I can't believe almost 2 years into this thing, I'm still making that mistake. Apologies. I think that the research very much drive home the point that the average Barbadian needs to see themselves as having a role in governance. I think often when you hear discussions, not just in terms of the responses that were received directly to those questions, but general discourse across Barbados, you see this kind of divorce from the fact that governance has a role for every single Barbadian. And I think what the charter does is provide an opportunity to start having that conversation and demonstrate the ways that, and provide a framework for the average Barbadian to see themselves in governance and as having a role. So we had Luke talking about the fact that, participation, civic participation isn't just voting, there's so much in between there. And I often say sometimes that, we need to teach civics in school. And I'm sure that may be happening in some form, but what about the rest of society that's outside of the corridors of a formal educational institution? I think that what you are doing, even with having this type of forum, creates the opportunity for us to share with one another the perspective and perhaps adopt the approach that we all have a very important role to play in governance and the wider understanding of nation building. Because separate and apart from taking up a political post, and I thought that question was very interesting, and the way it was interpreted was very interesting. Apart from taking up a political, there are things that the private sector can do. There are things that the civil society can do. And just as an individual, there is a role for you in building the Barbados that you want to see. And I think that's a very important understanding that we need to have permeate the society that we're trying to build.
Well, now let me come back to you and ask you what would you say is missing in the discussion that would help people better understand the value of the charter? Cornell, did you hear me?
Could you repeat the question?
I was asking you, what would you consider is missing in the discussion that would reinforce, as far as you're concerned, the value of the charter?
Um, I think what is missing from the discussion is in terms of people understanding fully the way that they can play within democracy. Um, the I think the lack of conversations in terms of civic engagement, thinking back to things like the conversation that people had earlier, something that voting is the only way which they could contribute into making Barbados represented and democratic. Because I think what is missing from this discussion is the way in which recognizing how we play roles in making Barbados what it is, how we can make them.
All right. Well, we just got a bit of an audio challenge with her at the moment, but we'll fix that and come back to her. But let me ask Sade really to help fill the void, so to speak. A little unfair, I suspect, but anyhow, Sade, let's bring you back here. I pose the question really this way, because obviously there's been a lot of discussion, and obviously, well, from my point of view, there may be some missing element here that's useful in getting people to embrace the charter, and that's the question I'm putting to you now.
In my experience, especially with the national policy development process that we're at the process of doing, we've done the traditional things. We did the traditional things, the surveys, we went out into the field, we did this group, the consultations with stakeholders, we did all of that. And what we found is that there was still a sense that youth voices were not being represented. And apart from making sure we were actively seeking out marginalized youth to get their voices involved in the process, we also tried to meet youth where they were. So that looked like something a little untraditional, non-traditional, sorry, we went to Twitter, where there was a lot of discourse, and we had what we call the tweet chat, and we asked them very specific questions that we actually pulled from our questionnaire to try to get them to engage. We used your report, and we sent out these short surveys because we said, our target market may not want to engage with a very long. So I'm just giving those examples to say that if the concern is about reaching every Barbadian where they are, you have to take the discussion where they are. So this forum, for example, is extremely useful, this virtual town hall meeting. But one of the things we had to confront with the policy, for example, was the fact that, especially in the context of a pandemic, where you have most of your engagements online, for example, there is a section of society, especially if you're trying to represent not just mainstream, but marginalized communities. There's a section of society that does not have internet, or if they have internet access, they may not be able to engage in these forums that are created. So I think if there was anything that I could suggest, obviously without having full visibility, has been done with respect to the charter, it would be to think critically about who the target market, every single Barbadian that you want to have involved. The mainstream typically will find a way. Those are well resourced, well positioned, they will find a way to make their voices heard. I think that the moral obligation is on those of us who are crafting this and pushing it forward to actively seek out those who are not inclined to find themselves in the spaces that naturally have the opportunity to contribute to an exercise like this.
Is it also reasonable to think that in your role as the chairperson of the National Youth Policy Coordinating Committee, that this is kind of a dry run for some of the things that should be raised and again reinforcing the value of the charter?
Absolutely. I mean, I was very pleasantly surprised when I first read the charter. I mean, being a lawyer, I'm going to go through it a few times and make my notes and send them in. But on my first reading, I definitely was very pleasantly surprised at how representative it was, how very grounded in diversity it was, how much emphasis it put in really fleshing out that catchphrase that has developed, this is who we are, or this is not who we are. I think a lot of very detailed oriented work into defining what it means to be Barbadian. And it definitely resonated with me as I read it. And I think that is a very good idea. And in that respect, I think the charter is extremely important in kind of establishing who we are as a people. And it can be a guiding light and kind of North Star, which is very important as we move on into the future of Barbados, not necessarily looking back at the past, but acknowledging where we've come from and taking that forward as we Barbados.
And you might rework the North Star to the North Point Star, right?
Yes, definitely.
This is the public view, and we're very happy to have all these contributors, all these young people involved, and you too can get involved. Let me remind you there are ways you can do so, as we can use the telephone numbers. You've got 228-5562, 228-5563, and 228-5562 is also the WhatsApp, so you can engage us there. Let's bring back Ronald. We fixed her audio, so let's bring her back in here and give her an opportunity to respond to the original question, which is there a gap? Is there something missing here that you think should be communicated to ensure that the charter is embraced by all?
I think the charter is very representative and reflective of the wider society. I think if there's anything I could think would perhaps be missing is persons who would generally be described as persons who tapped out of society in a sort of way, who don't vote, who don't tune into these types of discussions. They feel as though, they're just living day to day, trying to make ends meet. They consider Barbados to be a difficult place to live in terms of high taxes, the increase in terms of how expensive it is to live here. And so for them, they don't really participate in these types of things because they feel as though nothing's going to change. They don't feel as though they're being seen. And so going to them in that way, to hear their opinions, to have it reflected again, to have them seen or see themselves within the charter, I think that's perhaps the only thing I could think that's missing. But besides that, I think the charter is very reflective of the wider society.
And you're confident, competent, and comfortable with the protections articulated?
Yes, please. I think it was Sade. It really warmed my heart to see, the protections as it relates to gender, sex, sexual orientation, religious minorities, people who are marginalized and minoritized within the society, who often they have to fight really hard to have their rights recognized, who have to go off one line within the Constitution in terms of, not being discriminated against. It's clearly there for them now that they are seen by their leaders, and it is concrete, they're right. And so I think, that's great. Really did warm my heart to see that and see that after so many years of them asking for this to be done, that we're finally here.
Thank you very much, Ronald. And also thank you to Sade. But I'm going to hand it now to Alison, who's got the job of introducing one more voice.
Indeed. It's a voice that people have heard, and heard him use his many instruments, his literal voice, as well as the French percussion. He is a vocal coach and a youth advocate, as well as a community activist. If I said the name Kevin Watson, some might know who I mean, but if I said Sluggy Dan, we'll all know who we mean. Our next guest, he's a BCC music program graduate with a diploma in voice and performances from the London College of Music as well, with 16 years experience in none other than the Royal Barbados Police Force. He's a radio host as well on the popular program Fireworks. Even if there's still rule hours, let's hope he can level. And Beijing Rhythm and Rhyme, where he helped propel many of our young people here in Barbados to a much wider audience. I'm hoping he can be joined by our archivist and also an RSTAC member and social commentator, arts educator and performer Adrian Green. But let me begin with you, Sluggy Dan, and ask you your own perspective on this. Of course, the charter is an opportunity for us to look at improving accountability in governance and engaging people all around. But I want to ask you a question that was raised in the UNCTAD Creative Forum and borrow the phrase used there. Are we Barbadian creatives? Are we downloaders of other people's creations, or are we uploaders of our own? What are your views, and where does this fit in terms of the power of local governance and the role of our creatives?
Whoa! Are we downloaders of other people's creations? That is very, very deep. Or are we uploaders of our own? What I will say is that many cultures borrow from each other. So the downloading and the uploading or the borrowing as such, that argument is an argument that can go wrong in a circle, because I believe that we all borrow from each other. Music all started in Africa and it all started there. The drums, everything was created there. We created music. So sometimes cultures and borders separate us, but it's still all ours. And then what I must say though, ma'am, the inclusiveness of this charter, let me just say that the inclusiveness is what I really love, particularly the young people and the young creatives, because I believe in my heart that if we are going to create a world for the young people to inherit, they should have a significant say in the world that we are creating. I know most of us are my age group, or the age group above, would be in more senior positions and positions to make most of the decisions. But what I love about this is the inclusiveness. So this is telling the young persons, listen, we are creating a world for you. Come and have a say in the world that you are inheriting. Mm-hmm. And I must say here that pleases my heart, especially as me. I'm an agitator, and everyone know I like to burn the fire. And so the same way I burn the fire, I must sing the praises where they are due, and I must say that's loving inclusiveness, especially when we have young persons that are so brilliant. And my fight always was for last 20 years. My fight always was, you want to tell me in the whole country, there are no brilliant young people we see into the forefront? That is something that is imperative towards the development of a nation. Must have young people at the forefront, because more than majority of them is going to be here 20 years later, and most of us will not. So I must say again, I love the inclusiveness, and that is how you help create a culture that is quite diverse and inclusive. So kudos for that.
Well, I'm happy to hear your enthusiasm. I want to engage further because we know you like to and light a fire on community engagement in our civic environment as well as our political life, because there is still this perception. I'm going to bring in one of your partners in crime.
Yes,
if Adrian
yes,
Green.
my brother,
to engage on this matter and determine how we can, tell and generate far more community and political engagement, not just in the charter, but in what we do. How can we catalytic change for more engagement? Adrian.
Well, I just landed. You hit me with a big what question one time, Alison.
All right, well, let's let you that answer, and then you can come in.
Well, let me see what I could do, and then slugging up on the thing. Cause I know Sluggy got my back.
All right,
but
good.
In terms of building participation, this is a matter of education and invitation. We have to educate. And when I say educate, I ain't talking about in a book learning sense or necessarily in a schoolyard. But education happens across the board in so many ways. In fact, I came in and heard some talking about arts. And as I said in another session, many of us are educated by the artists that we love, by the singers and songwriters who we spend so much time with, these and the content creators who we spend hours looking at and watching and observing and learning from. So it's about education. But once you have that education, you got to be able to put that education in practice. So it's about invitation now and inviting people to come forward as is happening here, where persons are invited to come forward and speak their mind and say their piece. But the invitation must not be a kind of ceremonial invitation. It can't be an invitation like the Governor General, just, for sure. It has to be an invitation for real participation. That voice must really count. And this is where sometimes we fall down, where we don't do the due diligence in terms of educating people and giving people the fullness of information that they can make informed decisions. And then we invite people to participate. The participation is not a real, genuine, active participation. It's like, we just want you here so that you can make you feel good and feel sweet that you was a part of it. But we don't know what we want to do and what we gonna do. That is the real danger here. The public, the people of Barbados must feel as though they have a stake in this society and their voice counts. And Derek mentioned an issue that is very current right now, where persons are afraid that they do not have a say even in what happens to their own bodies. And this is a struggle which is ironic on the eve of the transition to written status. That debate about the rights and responsibilities as it concerns the individual's body, what they can and cannot do with their body, how what they do or do not do with their body affects their neighbor. That is close to the heart of the question that you asked, Alison. Are we willing to invite the public to really have their say on this issue, or as the government has chosen to do, the government of Barbados, the Prime Minister of Barbados, has come down firmly that this is not who we are. We don't pressure people into making those kinds of decisions. And you don't know that once you push people, you get a push back. People don't just stop and take it. And the Prime Minister of Barbados has decided that we don't want to divide the society in that way. And I think this was a wise decision as well, especially considering the point in history that we're at, where we're saying to Barbadians, look, we want you to play a greater role in the running of your affairs, what happens to your body, your country, on your watch. So it's about education, giving people the fullness of the information that they can make decisions for themselves, allowing them to make those decisions, and inviting them to participate fully in what decisions are being made.
And that's a good point, Adrian. Sluggy, don't go in. We do have someone to the public to contribute to the views on this program. And we have a question from the Government Information Service Facebook page. I hope you can read it. From Andrew Simpson, will Christian values be predominant under the new republic? So I want to just clarify for Andrew that we are addressing the charter and not the Constitution that is going to be discussed in considerable detail in 2022 in January. So I am sure that this is a question that the committee, the chair of the Freedom Rights Committee of RSAC and Adrian himself can note this question. I am not sure. Oh, we have another question coming in from Facebook. This is Kenesha Cummins. Will this new charter support the rights of the employees? Will this new charter support the rights of employees? So, Sluggy, you can kick off and dovetail on what Adrian said. Both of you can address this.
Okay. Can I, are you addressing the question or what Adrian say?
You can do both. I would like you to do both.
Well, for the charter, I'm not a part of the committee or policy making. As it pertains to what Adrian said, and Green, we spoke about this at length, bro. Like even the very meaning of education. Because when Adrian said not just the traditional way of education or the way we receive education, because in our long lengthy discussion we realized that a lot of the problem is we just don't want to educate differently. I find that, and we found that that's a big problem. Majority of the problem, like, don't want to educate differently. Like, the youth receive education this way, and we think the youth receiving education this way is wrong because we did it that way. And a lot of the times that the problem. So education is imperative, yes, and then to piggyback on what Adrian spoke about, not just a ceremonial invitation, and those are something people can experience personally, because if you got like a platform of a lot of young people, you might get invited to certain discussions and topics because your voice is incredibly powerful. But then when it comes to invitation to other things, their name might never get called, or they might never be in charge of this, or never be on this board, or never be a part of this. So a lot of the time, the invitation is just ceremonial. And I think that's what Adrian meant. I know it might ruffle some feathers. But I know it is true. And I've experienced it personally. I got platforms with over 60,000 young people, through working with Hush Money, Danny Cole, BIM Got Talent, on my page, like is thousands of young people only, and I'm sure there's no other person in BIM who got all of those young people for sure. Not in Barbados, not 60,000. So I might get invited to certain discussions, obviously because of that. But then in making certain policies, they may really want to hear what the young people got to say. Really is like, take this. But that's how it was before. You understand? What I like now is that is seemingly changing. So that way, like the direction, especially with these young people that we have here, you understand, who's quite diverse. So I think we should continue heading in that direction because that is the recipe for success when it comes to empowering the community and our people. So great points there, Mr. Green, my brother.
And I'd like Mr. Green perhaps to also respond to Ms. Cummins's question with regard to the charter, or if Sharida needs to come in here. But certainly I think that those are things that we would want to have the conversation. And since we have you all here, I think it's a good time to get further contributions. And I'm going to invite my co-host to take it from me here, so we continue the conversation.
Well, we've got a little time left, and we'd really like to get as much in as possible because this really is not the final, but we have a wrap-up session coming up on Friday where we hope to be able to distill all of the positions that have been put on the table and give you a rounded impression of the contributions made by several people, not just in the panels, but by members of the public, who's of GIS and also CBC on the Facebook pages online. So this is a stage, though, where I'd like to really go around the table, so to speak, as Alison suggested. Frana Bulbule was on earlier in the first segment. I think you've had a chance to listen to a lot of the contributions here. And Frana, I'd just like to ask you to just talk about assurances that you have received and any lingering doubts that have surfaced as a result of some of the things you've heard today. So it's your turn.
Yeah, thank you. And from listening, to the other program, there has been a running thread throughout everything that we're saying. And one, it's the importance and the inclusion of young people and the diversity of the Barbadian landscape. And I think those 2 points, when it comes to governance, have really been some of the strong points made today and refreshing on seeing the charter. But I think it's also telling for where we're at as a society and where we from. I think the fact that so many of us lean on these points as sort of, navigating the way forward as a republic and holding on to that to say we need to hold ourselves accountable to these things shows us that we still have a lot of work to do. And the charter really is the foundation upon which we can begin to do that work. And it will be hard work. We also spoke, I think, to the fact of looking beyond those traditional ways of doing things, those things that have been long ingrained in us, and thinking outside of the box. The ability to reach people, the ability to connect people to leadership and decision making requires us to think beyond those traditional frameworks of how we view leadership in its entirety, how we lead as people. And I mean, as a woman, I think, from a minority group, as a woman of color, oftentimes we have to change ourselves to fit the mold of leadership. And it shouldn't be this way. And I think the charter and a lot of what we discussed today is how do we break free from those molds that have long, restricted us as a society. And we have a lot to work on, I think, but this charter provides a good foundation.
And talking about working a lot, I mean, based on your own history, your own experiences, etc., we can't just put the chart on the table and hope that everybody will just embrace it automatically. Where do you see us going with this effort in terms of public education, reorientation, etc.?
the reality is the charter is not a piece of paper. It has to be a living, breathing document. It has to be in each and every one of us. And I think the ability for us to read it and see ourselves in it is the first step. The second is, how do we bring it alive? How do we ensure that the generations that come after us continue to see themselves in this charter? And public education is one piece of that puzzle, but it's also, how do we bring across that message? And what forms do we utilize to do that? I think a lot of the panelists spoke to the fact that we need to engage not only more on social media, but we need to include young people who have bright, innovative ideas. And I know this firsthand, when you come with those bright, innovative ideas, you're met with, that's not how we do things here. So we need to really break free from that to ensure that people feel it within their hearts and their minds, and then can act on it.
Thank you very much. I want to turn to Sade because I want to draw on her legal training and experience, and also ask her to combine that with her youth policy directive, so to speak, and give us your thoughts now. You've heard from several people here today, and talk about where you see us going next. Because the charter, I repeat, the charter, interestingly, Farana says, is not just a piece of paper. It's got to work.
Agreed. I definitely think that the charter is a very good framework. It's a good ideal. It's supposed to be aspirational. And I think it's really important that people, I thought that the questions that were asked from the public was interesting, because read the charter. I think it's really important that people actually engage with the charter. It's only 6 pages long. It's very accessible language. And I say that, it's not full of legal jargon. It's really accessible language. I think it's important that every Barbadian reads the charter and understands where it's going and what it presents and what it means for them. In terms of where I see us going, I'm hoping that we go in a direction where we see move toward republicanism and the creation of this charter as an opportunity to chart our course in a very positive direction. The charter speaks to things like respect and equitable development, sustainable development, social partnership. These are concepts that speak not just to the inclusivity that was mentioned earlier, but to purpose-driven development that serves the people. And I love the fact that it's speaking to not only economic development or growth, but social development, social mobility. And I think that I'd like to see, an fortune teller, so I'll speak in terms of what I want to see. I want to see a Barbados that is truly reflective of what's in that charter, rather than crafting a charter that looks like what Barbados is now. I'd love to see Barbados develop into the Barbados that's described in that. And I think that, if I had to leave any parting words, it would really be, pick up the charter, read it. It's accessible. It can be read. You don't need a law degree or experience in political science, for example, in order to understand it. Read the charter and see what it is that we're trying to create for Barbados. And, if you can find a way to make it better, by all means, use the opportunities, use the contact information, and make that contribution, because every single Barbadian has that opportunity afforded to them.
Thank you very much. I hope that Kevin Slagidan is still there, because I want to have his input as well. And I'm going to bring back Adrian as well. And I hope that Ronel also there as well, as we go around the virtual table. Kevin, you have a particular function, just as a musician, but certainly you make the point of your role as a community activist, etc. But you also are in the media, and therefore people will respond to you in ways that they wouldn't respond to Julian Rogers, for instance. So you have a job to do. Do you accept that responsibility?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a job I got to do. Not talking my business, but that is the way I grew up. That is the life I grew up in. So it isn't something that I say, well, I'm going to be a community activist because, you know, I'm going to fight for the poor. You know what I mean? I really was one of those poor children. You know what I mean? I really was one of those children where mother and father, you know, had it rough. I really was one of those children that was extremely hard, is in trouble. So it's not a job for me. You know what I mean? Because not being serious, because to be honest, and being personal again, I don't get paid from anywhere. You know what I mean? From anywhere, from no one. There's no one could come and say, well, this is your job, this is your monthly salary, or this is your weekly salary. I don't get paid from anywhere. So this is honestly my life. So I could say this on CBC TV publicly. I don't get paid from anyone anywhere. So this is not a job. This is just my life. I just honestly believe that in our communities, each one should reach one. You know what I mean? I just honestly believe that. That's just how it lives. I guess in today's world, it's so cruel that it seems that I'm doing something so amazing and awesome. Where truly, I'm just trying to be a good person. That's just the truth. It's just sad. It's so amazing.
Yeah, and I'll just challenge you to answer one other question in terms of the communication.
No problem.
About reaching,
of course,
every section of the young people in Barbados and even in the young in the diaspora community. People keep talking about reaching the boys on the block. How do we reach them?
The boys on the block ain't hard to reach, but you have, you know, like, if you're a fisherman, right, bro, and you realize, well, my life depends on fishing. I don't want the government to hear this. I want all the people in positions to hear this. I want all the consultants in youth and culture and community. I want everybody to hear this. If you were a fisherman and your life depended on catching fish, would you stand up in the sea and crawl with the fishing coming on my line? And I want a person, and Adrian is an artist and my brother, so I want Adrian to follow this, because to me it is crazy, and honestly, and I'm being very honest and sincere, that I want Adrian to help me. I honestly don't understand it, because I honestly look at it as if I was a fisherman and my life depended on catching fish to feed my family, would I stand up with my line and cry, the fish is not biting, or will I go and catch the fish? Will I go where the fish is? So that would say Adrian might need to explain it, because they honestly don't understand it, where the block is, where the boys are. If you know the boys like this, or you know the boys like things a certain way, or the boys like things to be said a certain way, then you can do it, because there's people that you can use. I'm not saying only myself. I just pops up where the violence is, so they probably see me a little different. And then I was lucky, extremely lucky, because of the police band to be qualified. So I just live the best of both worlds. But I'm not the only person that is able to reach and relate. So if it's not me that don't want to work with, there are many other persons who only reach them. If the boys like Instagram a lot, if they like girls or people that dance on Instagram a lot, you can go ahead and use those influencers. If you know there's certain radio shows that the boys on the block like, you could use it. If you know the boys like to learn, you can find creative ways to use that way, using protocols to reach the boys. I mean, I don't want to give away too much, obviously, because there are persons who are obviously more qualified and better suited for the job than I am. So those were the persons that were hired. But those are just a few ways on which we can reach the boys. And of course, when we come back again, I'll be back again. We have a wrap-up show. I'll be more than willing to share all and everything I know, because I'm just here to help. But for me, it's extremely simple. Where the boys are, where the blocks are, where they're receiving information and how they receive the information, give them the information the way they receive it. You know what I mean? And it's like what Adrian was trying to explain, or what Adrian was explaining about education. You know what I mean? That way to be like, don't focus on the traditional meaning of the word education. So that's what Adrian was saying in his opening about the education. Is just a matter how we educate. You know what I mean? I could teach you tables by saying 2 2s are 4, 2 4s are 8. Or I could say 2 2s are 4. 2 4s are 8. You know what I mean? I teach you the same thing. You learn the same thing, just different ways. You might not like music, so you learn it more stoic. 2 2s are 4, or Adrian might be more creative. 2 2s are 4, you know what I mean? Or he might like to see girls dancing, or he might like to see people playing football. There's so many different ways in which you can share information, bro. You know what I mean? Like, you can be creative.
Okay. So there you are. So Adrian, are you going to do a dub boy
Yes.
version of your tool?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Adrian, you've been challenged.
Yes, Sluggy and I will be producing a Bajan version of Sesame Street, coming soon to a screen near you.
Guarantee.
But just to add on to what my brother...
Adrian, your parting shot.
Just quickly, Sluggy asks for an explanation of why is it so difficult, and I think it's important for us to realize where Barbados has come from. Barbados has been, and in many ways still is, a plantation society. And it is a divided society, divided by class, divided by ethnicity. They are cultures. They used to talk about the subculture, but they are subcultures within subcultures. And it's such that you could live in one Barbados and not have a clue what is going on in the other Barbados. So for instance, just recently, someone said to me, well, he don't understand how comes, these youngsters who have received so much from the Barbadian educational system, how come they are so hell-bent on violence and doing dirt to one another? And in his Barbados, he received a lot from the educational system. But the fact of the matter is, some statistics show that 60% of Barbadians leave secondary school without certificates. In another Barbados, they did not receive as much from the educational system as others. So when that person from one Barbados decides now that they want to speak to a person from another Barbados, they will come speaking the language of their Barbados, and the language of their Barbados may be totally contrary to the language of the other Barbados. And unless that persons are really willing to meet each other halfway and open up themselves to each other, or somebody got to start it. Unless somebody starts that, there is no communication going on. We're talking past each other. So this transition to a republic, as I keep saying, is just one more step in that long, long, long march away from the plantation. As Bob Marley said, 400 years of slavery is not wiped away so easy. Barbados is a youth in the grand scheme of nations, and we have a lot of maturing to do. And I endorse for Hannah's comment. That maturing does not come because we wrote something on a piece of paper and call it a charter. That charter now must come out of the people, because it is not a completed document either. The people must say whether they want it or not. And when it comes out of the people, it must then encircle the people and become the people, and the people become it. That is not something that you do in a day.
Great. A great point. Thank you very much. Let me bring Luke Lascaris, who was in earlier in the program today, for his final thoughts. And I still will also bring Ronald King into the mix as well. Luke?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I I want to also echo for Hannah and Adrian's comments that the charter is a document and it needs to encircle, it needs to encompass, but it needs to not come from them alone, but it needs to be something that they embrace completely, and that they regurgitate and they constantly live, and not just the charter isn't just a static document frozen in time, but that it's a living document that is not only for the now but for the future, because it's supposed to be for future Barbados as well. It's supposed to be for our children and our children's children, and it's supposed to encompass all those people. So it really is quite an ambitious project, but it really is a step towards the future of Barbados and the future of what things mean for us and the way that we are looking to go and the type of people that we're looking to become. But again, and that's why it must be so inclusive, and it needs to be embraced by the people. And outside of that too, I think it needs to speak towards a more tolerant, more equitable society, more equal society. I will also look to rubber stamp Adrian's comment that we are a plantation society, and the change to the republic, the new charter, the way that we move forward, all looks to how we move away from the plantation, how we look to become a new people, how we find ourselves outside of not just slavery and the colonial period and the post-colonial period, but what it means also for the future, whether it's 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, what Barbados is and what it speaks to become, and all the ideas that we hold about ourselves. And I think the youth is an integral part of that. The creatives are an integral part of that, and they all need to be embraced in this coming Barbados. And outside the youth and creatives, also to all different categories of Barbadians, whether it's race, sex, whether it's gender, sexual orientation, all types of Barbadians who make up what Barbados is, who form parts of the diaspora, all need to be included in this new Barbados that we are looking to become. But I also do echo that it's not going to happen overnight, that it's going to be something very, very, a time-consuming project, but it's not something that we should give up. It's something that we should always strive to work towards. So yes, I feel like I've been talking too much, but I want to wrap up by saying that, I want to wrap up by saying that, it's not just something that happens on Independence Day when we change the Republic. It's not going to happen January 2022 or any point beyond that, or whenever Republic Day is. But it's a project that's going to continue into the future. So, yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Luke. Really appreciate your input and your contribution, particularly. Finally, let's hear from Ronald King, who has been with us as well on today's panel. Ronald, your turn. Would you unmute yourself? You can go ahead now.
I was saying I wondered if Luke was going to leave anything for me to say. He said so much of what I wanted to say between him, Adrian, and Farhana. Just echoing a lot of what they said in terms of, the charter being a living and breathing document. It is not all of what, it is not everything. We are going to have to add to it in coming years. We're going to have to include people who feel or who feel within coming months, years that they're not being seen by the document, and they need to be included as well. But more importantly, that the point of that when this is done, when we've adopted it, that is not the end of it. We have to buy into it. We have to make it, what it is. We have to think of this as a project for the future Barbados, for the future generations, and ensure that, we're making Barbados what we want it to be through this document.
So good to hear all these points of view. Now, the last word really belongs to Alison.
Thank you, Julian. And I'm really going to use the last seconds of the program to leave us all with this question that came in from Washington, D.C. on my WhatsApp. And it says, this is very interesting. I'm wondering, how will the Charter help Bajans look at themselves and characterize themselves so that a person from outside can say, a Bajan is ... Let's hope we can all answer that. We've had some very stimulating ideas and suggestions from the petition framework to education and invitation, and the invitation is open for you to join us again on it. Remember, the committee, the Republican status, like to get your audio and video inputs via email by Thursday. But we are here again on Friday at 5, and you are free to join us then. Join on Facebook at CBC Barbados or at GS Barbados, and of course, make your calls then. We'll be back again on Friday at 5, and this is our journey to shaping this Charter of Barbados as a precursor to us moving along to the road of becoming a republic. Thank you for joining us and participating this evening, and we look forward to seeing you again on Friday at 5.